Hello, everyone. I'm just going to give 30 more seconds for people to join. But I think we will probably start now as it was 1 minute past. So let's get going. So hello, everybody. Welcome all to Verto's March webinar, where today we're going to be spending some time focusing on what's next for those affected by Microsoft's Project Online end-of-life plans that are fast approaching. So for those who are joining us on these webinars for the first time, it's really great to have you here. We run a session like this on relevant trends and topics once a month. And it's a great way to hear about what is happening in the PPM world, but also a great way to get to know us at Verto, the way we operate, and get to know many of my colleagues who I pull into these sessions, depending on what is being discussed and the expertise they have, which I know they absolutely love doing. If you're interested in attending more of these webinars, just head to the events page on our website and you'll see what's coming up next, and there are links where you can register there as well. So today, the session, as always, it is being recorded. That is so that we can send you out the recording on email afterwards. It's also going to be available to watch on our website if you prefer to just go there, but also our YouTube channel, which I'll link to on the email when you get that. It would be great if you could subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's a very useful addition to our content channels. There's loads of fresh and varied video content that we're adding all the time, so I'm sure you'll find it useful. Craig, can you jump onto the next slide for me, please? Thank you. So now, as you're all aware, Project Online is retiring. So today, along with my colleagues Craig Dixon, who is Verto's Solutions Specialist, and Ross Mardell, Verto's Founder and Chief Product Officer, we are going to be covering the following agenda points to provide you with the facts and your options and highlight some of the risks that you might want to be aware of as Project Online comes to a close. Basically, we have done all the research for you, so you don't have to. So we're briefly going to talk you through the current situation, what Microsoft are proposing as their alternatives. We're then going to discuss why you should consider a portfolio approach instead. Next up, we can show you how you can make very light work of migrating your current data over to the Verto platform. And then we're going to run you through a live demo of Verto so you can see what the benefits are from switching. Finally, we're going to leave some time for the Q&A. So if you've got any questions throughout the session, do pop them into the Q&A section. That's the section that's open so that we can get to them quite swiftly at the end. Okay, next slide. So we're all aware now, Project Online is no more from September. It's not the only date to consider, though. As of April, existing tenants will no longer be able to accept new users to the platform. So it's really starting to wind down now, with limitations happening, as early as next month. Not to mention, Project for the Web was removed last August. So what else is available and for how long? We are going to get to that all in a bit, but for now, next slide, please, Craig. So for now, I'd like to just warm up your brains a little bit and ask you at this stage to complete a poll. So let me just load that. So this poll, we'd like you to have a little think about through all of the decisions you're making about this change. What is your biggest concern about this transition? So the options are you mostly concerned about getting your data, exporting your data over to a new system, correctly and in its best form? Are you most concerned about learning new tools? Have you been with Microsoft for a long time and the upheaval of that is going to be quite significant? Are you mostly concerned with a successful rollout, either to the wider organization or to your immediate teams? Or is it that it's imperative that you choose the right solution for the type of organization that you are and the type of delivery and projects that you run? So if you could all just have a go at selecting your option there. Okay, so that's quite interesting. Craig, Ross, I don't know if you can see the answers.
And indeed,
Can indeed, lovely. So I'm going to bring you in now, or you're in. Well done, thank you. So I wonder, are you surprised by the result of this poll, or is it not something that you're?
from my perspective, I think it was what I was expecting to see. I mean, selecting the right solution is probably going to be at the tip of the tree in terms of we're having to pivot, we're having to change our approach to something new. What does new look like, and will it work for us? Having to move away from something we've been familiar with in recent times. I was interested to see that learning new tools is joint bottom on that list because I think it can almost go hand in hand. And in terms of making the transition to a new tool, you need to manage the change and get comfortable with it. But definitely leading on the top is something I was expecting with selecting the right solution.
I think if you're doing selecting the right solution is correct because you've got to consider the cost of change. There's whatever you do, whether you're moving from project to a Verto solution, PPM solution like ours, or to any other tool, there's a very real cost of change, and that it's all of those other three things you talk about there, Laura: data export, learning a new tool, and enabling a successful rollout. They are all part of cost of change, and if you get the bottom one wrong, selecting the right solution, inevitably the cost of change ends up being a much higher cost, and your ROI may evaporate if you don't
Mhm.
if you can't do it.
Yeah, yeah, really interesting. Well, we'll get those results out on the email afterwards as well, so that you can all have another deep dive into that. But yeah, for now, I'm going to pass on to you, Ross and Craig. Thanks very much.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Laura. So I think the first place to start from this side of things is what alternatives is Microsoft proposing to you? You're currently using Microsoft Project Online, and as Laura alluded to there, some of you may have used Project for the Web in the past. Both of those tools have gone or are going. So what alternatives are they proposing? The first alternative that we're seeing a primary push towards is Planner Premium. Planner, for some of you who may know, is focused around a Kanban agile style collaborative management tool, but that has since shifted to Planner Premium, which has almost taken into account some of the functionality that was lost with Project for the Web. And it's a great lightweight tool for collaboration, work management at a team level. The other option that's being positioned as well as an alternative is something we're all going to be fairly familiar with, and it's that project server edition, which is that local solution, that local platform that sits on your network, on your devices, that we probably all know, and that is probably closer to a like for like switch in terms of what you would currently see with Project Online and the functionality that you'd come to expect with an alternative. But with both options, they come with considerations that need to be factored in. Also, as to whether there is additional alternatives that you probably guess we will get to as we progress through this session. Um, I think some of the primary considerations for me is around the migration, which we will talk about, also about the management of in-flight projects, also about the timing of the change and the cultural shift, and how that will adapt based on the users and how the tool's in place at the moment. Ross, from an alternative perspective, is there anything you'd like to add in terms of what Microsoft are positioning?
It's really interesting, this one, Craig, because I think possibly for the first time in my career, I find myself in that position where Microsoft don't appear to be moving forwards; they appear to be moving backwards from taking technology to the next level. And Planner Premium just isn't as the same sort of grade as Project Online. It just isn't, and it's really bizarre that Microsoft are positioning it like that. I don't. I think probably most of the people on this call as well are a little bit mystified about how they've decided to position it like that. And then when you move into Project Server Subscription Edition, of course, that you're starting to move to back to on-prem devices. So you're starting to have servers in place, which then comes with the IT admin overhead of doing those sorts of things, the configuration, all of that sort of stuff that we kind of all got away with. We've all gone away from now. We've all moved to SaaS solutions for delivering this stuff. And I think Microsoft's approach is kind of strange. And I think what they're doing is they're trying to promote, obviously, their Power Platform tool, their Power Tools. Can you create some sort of Frankenstein solution out of all of their Power Tools, including SharePoint Online and all those sorts of things? Of course you can. Absolutely, you can, but then you start to get into the point of supportability and how do you maintain it and how what do you do when things go wrong. All of those sorts of areas start to make it more complex. And actually, you're moving from Project Online, which was relatively, uh, it was certainly a stable platform, but it provided most of the functionality that people wanted, down to something that just doesn't provide the level of functionality that people who are running running PMOs need. And so it's really strange that Microsoft have chosen to do it. And so, I mean, it's a great opportunity for people like us who provide PPM tools. And I'm sure, Craig, you're going to get into that in a minute on actually how we can provide a very credible alternative to what Microsoft are offering now.
Absolutely, and I think that there's a couple of key points that you mentioned there in terms of no matter what option you look at here, with what's on screen at the moment, there's going to be some considerations that you need to make as to whether you step back in terms of functionality, in terms of Planner Premium, or whether we go back from a technological perspective in terms of on-prem. And then the other thing that you mentioned there was around fragmented solutions and tools, which you won't get away from with either of these, and so there will be the challenge, the inefficiencies, the Frankenstein deployments that will just remain, regardless of the option. There is also that third alternative that I think Microsoft are pushing around a CRM perspective. We purely haven't mentioned that because we don't think it's relevant from a P3M perspective, but there is a third alternative out there that they're pushing as well. So that's the alternative that the current supplier are offering in terms of Microsoft and what's there. And of course, like what Ross alluded to, that will come hand in hand with Power Apps, mix of Word, spreadsheets, so on and so forth. And so there's another approach that warrants consideration at the current moment, and that is shifting from that light touch approach, the team work management of schedules, to a broader P3M approach. We've touched on it a couple of times, but at the moment, this isn't a choice to transition away from MS Project Online. This isn't a solution that you have made a decision to transition away from. It is a solution that is going offline at the end of September, as Laura mentioned. And so change to an extent is inevitable in this circumstance. You will be looking to go to an alternative. But what we found with a lot of clients and organizations that we're speaking to is that they're finding this is almost the opportune time to broaden the view set and the horizons, to start looking at wider benefits that can be delivered instead of just transitioning and accepting the drawbacks or some of the cons that come with the initial alternative positions. A lot of the time in and amongst using MS Project, whether it Planner Premium, Project Desktop, or Project Online, Project for the Web, there is still going to be a lot of disparate systems in play. That could be spreadsheets, SharePoint lists, Word documents for more written information like business cases. And so what we're seeing is a shift to considering that broader P3M approach, looking wider than just the schedule side of things and the planning, and looking at the operational benefits and efficiencies that can be delivered across the chain. So we're not just talking about the team and the end user benefits, we're talking the strategic level benefits at that portfolio level, and being able to pull all of that into a single platform at the same time as you're transitioning away from MS Project Online, right? You're in the motion of change, you're going through it with Project Online, and so a lot of the people we speak to are actually saying, do you know what? Let's wrap in and improve how we manage our risks. Let's get ahead of what we're doing from benefits realization. And then they start to look up the chain and think, actually, we could prioritize better to manage our resources more effectively, so on and so forth. So we really are seeing a shift to the P3M approach for some of our clients and organizations that have been primarily focused on that Project Online equivalent, and they're now looking at the growth, and the broader horizons that might be around the corner that they can take advantage of. But Ross, is there anything from this side of things that you'd like to tack on to?
Yeah, I think one of the things there you said is about people taking a wider P3M approach. And that's not to say people in Project Online aren't doing resourcing and risk management and things like that, because you can do those things in Project Online. But typically what we see is actually most people use Project Online for what you described, Craig, is doing task management and things like that. Maybe a little bit of resourcing, maybe a little bit of risk, maybe a bit of dashboarding, those sorts of things. But actually, if you getting a new dedicated SaaS platform that is designed just to do P3M, why not take that opportunity when you've got to move anyway to start to elevate your data, start to elevate what it is you can report on? How can I look at this from a portfolio perspective, a more strategic approach to looking at my data and analysing what it is as a business we're doing and how it aligns to our strategic objectives? And that was always difficult to do in Project Online. It was possible. I'm not going to say it wasn't, because honestly, Project Online is a great product. But if you're being forced to migrate anyway, move to a tool that is designed from the ground up to do that.
Absolutely. One of the biggest points of this is around the migration and the shifting from one platform to another. It's really important, but that doesn't mean it should feel overwhelming or it should be over-engineered or overcomplicated. It's something that if thought through, if done in due time and with the right approach, should be, as you can see on the slide there, something that should be fairly easy and straightforward to do. There's different options in terms of how that migration can take place. You've got the more conventional data import routines, migration of data from one platform to another, and then management of that. But what we're also seeing, and something that our dev team has done a great job of leveraging in recent times, is getting AI to assist in that. Now, oftentimes when you're using a breadth of tools, or you're using spreadsheets and Word documents, there will be a lack of structure and consistency in how that data is prepared, the terminology used, so on and so forth. And what AI is really good at, and I'll let Ross come in just a moment because he's a lot closer to this than I am, is rationalizing a lot of that, making sense of it, and putting it in the right place. So leveraging AI to manage that transfer of data, whether it be in disparate formats, different templates, is something that AI can massively assist with. And so that's something we're seeing as a primary driver to simplify and take away some of the legwork and the data cleansing that would come in with the more old school migration pieces.
Yeah, absolutely right, Craig. The one thing we're seeing is people really taking on our AI assisted imports. And it's probably best if I just describe a little bit about how that came about and how it might benefit you guys who are on this call today. Is we had a very large central government organisation who said to us, we need to import the risks. We're really struggling with importing risks using your import spreadsheet. And okay, we said, okay, fine, send us the other ones that you've got and let's have a look and see if we can adjust the import. So they sent us 20 different risk spreadsheets, all in a completely different format. And they said, this is the tip of the iceberg. We've got more than this, but here's the top 20. And they were all different. They had their columns differently. They were storing the different things. And that's when it came to us, actually, we can use AI to do this. So we initially created the AI assisted import just around risk. And what it does is but essentially looks at that spreadsheet and goes, okay, right, that's the title of the risk that someone's storing there. And that's the likelihood, that's the impact. They might not call them that, and they'll have them in completely random orders in the spreadsheet. And there's the person who it's assigned to, and that's which department they're in, and this is the criticality, this is when it's due, all of those sorts of things end up being in random columns in a spreadsheet. And so we took it and went, okay, can AI help us with do that? So now what we've done is that essentially the AI reads it all, maps all of those fields and says, this is where they map into Verto. Oh, and you're using a drop down there. So this is the drop down value that we recommend. Now, it might not be that they use the same words, but the AI will look at it and go, oh yeah, that matches to that. So excellent matches to, brilliant, for example. Yeah, that just a silly example, but those sorts of things, and it will choose the correct drop down value for you as you go along, and it will sort out things like you've got inconsistencies in dates, those sorts of things that it will sort out as it goes through, and that has changed the way that organisation now imports their risks in particular. So they now just throw the spreadsheet at it. It goes, yep, look, I'm looking at it. That's how it needs to map. Boom, import. And so we did it first for risk, and then we actually extended that out to tasks and milestones and all of the other potential areas you might issues stakeholders, all of the areas of Verto that we currently have in our system that you might want to import data for. You give it the spreadsheet, it will do the mapping, import the data for you. So it's a really, really good tool that many of our users are now using.
Exactly, and I think it goes a long way to helping with one of the considerations that I think organizations need to make in terms of in-flight projects. And what do we take over? What do we keep in the old tool? Well, hopefully with the options we've spoken about so far, especially the AI assistance piece, that should massively simplify that. If you want to pull it over, pull it over. It shouldn't have to be a daunting task and it shouldn't have to be overwhelming. It's absolutely critical, but it shouldn't be a hurdle and it shouldn't be something that is challenging and concerning.
Yeah.
With that in mind, it probably makes sense to have a look at how Verto not only manages the transition and the migration over from MS Project, but also how it can broaden those horizons from a P3M perspective that we've been talking about throughout the session. So what I'm going to do for the next 10 to 15 minutes, give or take, is do a high-level introduction into Verto, and we're going to start specifically from a planning and scheduling perspective. Why? That is where the bulk of the functionality in MS Project Online resides. So as Ross mentioned, it's a great product. There's lots of things it can do, but if you look at MS Project in a vacuum, your brain initially goes to scheduling, planning, Gantt, so on and so forth. So what I'm going to do is share the screen. And this is the Verto platform. It's currently embedded in Teams, but it's not a Power App. It's a native application that you can access in the browser as well. But we can cross those bridges if you guys are interested later on or on another session. And this is an example project that I'm currently in. The platform's fully configurable and it can be fully tailored to suit your requirements. But I think we should probably start with the plan, which as it stands is currently empty in the project that I'm in at the moment. Now, in order to manage the transition, we spoke about data migration. And so being able to take data from Microsoft Project and simply import that into Verto is something that should be fairly easy and fairly straightforward to achieve. So all I've done here is drag and dropped my project import example, and now the system has then created a Verto Gantt chart and plan as a result of that. Now, our Gantt chart's interactive, but as you can see there, just pulling that project schedule over shouldn't need to be an arduous task. Very much a drag and drop, let the system do the work, marrying up the fields and presenting it back in Verto's format from a Gantt perspective. Now, from a scheduling view, you've got all the functionality you would expect to have. You can see things like the critical path here. The Gantt should be interactive and easy to use. One primary piece of feedback that we see with organizations moving from Microsoft planning tools to Verto is the usability and how it should be easy for everyone to join, collaborate, and work within without compromising the sophistication that you may need from an advanced function. And so it's really easy to manage. You've got all the bells and whistles you would expect in here and more. There's baselining, auto scheduling, Slack, all that stuff in there. But without spending too much time on that for now, in terms of that like-for-like transition as a starter for 10, that would hopefully go a long way to addressing how you would not lose the functionality that you're familiar with, but easily be able to transfer from that system that's going online offline in a few months. Now, you will notice on the right-hand side that we've got a lot of different areas within my project, and you might be thinking, oh, some of these are in spreadsheets, some of these are in SharePoint lists, or some other of these bits and pieces we're also doing in MS Project Online. We'll come back to that in a moment, but we spoke about AI from an import perspective, but I'd like to touch on it briefly from a PPM perspective. And so what you're seeing here is a fairly empty project. We've just imported the plan. I've got no risks currently within my risk register. We have a concept known as Verto Intelligence, which aims at leveraging agentic AI to have meaningful conversations with virtual agents that can take on professional roles, that can then provide assistance, analysis, and they can even do things like generate risks, provide cost profiles. They can even prepare a plan for you. So once you've done the migration from project and you're starting with new projects once you've transitioned to Verto, you can actually use the VIPs to generate a plan based on the information you've provided for the project. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select from a couple of these partners. You can see I've got Peter Project, who's a project manager. I've got Ruby Risk, that's a risk manager, Barney Benefits, Carlo Communication. There's quite a few in here that you can take advantage of, and there's more that can be added. These are just a subset that we've started with. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a chat with Peter Project, Ruby Risk, and I've got Carol, the coordinator, as you would expect, in there um, for safety and security purposes as the coordinator to pull things together. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask these agents to have a look at that plan and to help me with the risks. As I'm doing that, as I mentioned earlier, Ross is very close with this as the CPO, and so I'll probably let him come in if there's any value or context he would like to add at this point.
While you're typing, you mean, Craig, right?
While I'm copying prompts.
Yeah. Yeah, it's probably worth just explaining. You saw Craig adding those virtual agents in there. One of the design philosophies when we were creating our Verto intelligence partners was actually to say, look, most people talk to one AI. We're all used to talking to Copilot, or we're all used to talking to Perplexity or ChatGPT, whichever our preferred LLM is. But actually, you get one response. So we kind of wanted to make this a bit more personal, where you're creating a virtual team. So you can create your virtual team, and as Craig alluded to here, he's put Ruby Risk and Peter Project in to this particular team. Peter Project is a dedicated project manager. That's what he is set up as an agent. He is set up to be a dedicated project manager. Now, we've just created a generic project manager, but you could say he's an agile project manager. You could say he's a waterfall, however you choose to set the system up. Ruby Risk, as the name implies, is a risk manager. She knows everything there is to know about risk. And we set her up as her persona so that she is focused around looking at risks. And so what you do essentially is we've got around 18 starting personas where you can say, okay, I'm going to add Ruby. She's going to deal with my risk. I'm going to add Frank. He's going to deal with my finance. I'm going to add Barney. He's going to do benefits. Like, we gave them silly names, right? But they really become memorable. And what happens is you start to have this psychological thing where people start talking to your AI agents as if they're members of your team. And I have had Craig come to me and say, I've just had an argument with Carol about adding this thing. And he's talking about the Carol coordinator, who's the agent that's running on this chat. And so it really starts to bring AI to life because people get it. They feel like they're interacting with those agents. And it really adds something. And all of our customers who use this really love it. Sorry, Craig, you've done a load of prompting while I was chatting away.
That's great. I think it really sets the scene and provides a bit of context. What I've done for this conversation, I'm keeping it fairly simple, but I've asked Peter Project to recommend the top 3 risks associated from a delivery perspective based on the plan that I've just imported. And so I've also then asked Ruby as that risk professional to review Peter's work and add any comments that she has. So Peter Project has come back with 3 risks, one around data quality and migration, one about the configuration and testing, and one about user adoption. And considering it's very limited data from a project perspective, we're starting with an empty project and a simple plan. I think it's quite close to the mark in terms of what I would look at from a risk perspective. And you can see all the information and rationale it's given there. Ruby Risk has come back to say that she broadly agrees, but she would tighten the framing and being a bit more cautious on a couple of the ratings. So she's come in with that risk professional head and refined some of the information that Peter has added. She's also given an additional risk to consider as well. And so what I can do from there, as I could probably write this prompt out because it's fairly simple, but I'm just going to ask them to add these to the risk register. And what is now going to happen is they are going to review that data, and then the Verto system is going to, again, review the information, take the risks that they've assessed and analyzed here for me, and it's going to add that to the risk register for me. Now, this doesn't have to happen just on risk. As I mentioned, it can also happen for the plan. It can also happen from a cost perspective and the other core elements from EPM. This is really good from a support and an enabling piece, and it really gets over that blank page hurdle. So especially with junior PMs, but sometimes more across the board, you're starting a new project. What does my plan look like? What are the top risks that I should be considering? And sometimes having that professional agent over your shoulder to start you off is a great way for you to start that you can then refine. And the other thing to mention as well is that being able to take those risks and put your framework from an organizational context perspective into the system is really important. So as I continue chatting to the agents, Ross, could you very briefly touch on that organizational context and how it comes through with the conversation?
Yeah, you need to go kick them. They've decided to have an argument amongst themselves, Craig.
Yeah, they don't normally,
So
but this time they have.
the it, yeah, it's quite interesting. You talked about a couple of things there. One, the blank page problem, which is kind of what you're alluding to here, is that actually I started with zero risks. Started with zero risks in this project, and someone says to me, "Can you go and add the risks? What risks are you supposed to add?" And by doing this by allowing the agents to do it, you can start to really fill out those areas of the system where somebody says to you, "Go add the risks." You start with a blank page. What are you supposed to add? So you go through and you add those. You can get the agents to do that job for you as they are actually doing now. Um, but as Craig said, it's based around the organizational context. So Verto knows what environment it's operating in. So whether it's working in a council environment, whether it's working in an NHS environment, a central government organization, wherever it happens to be operating, it might be a private sector organization. It knows what the organizational context is. It knows what the strategic objectives of that organization is. It knows what the what the leadership team. It knows what the internal meetings are that need to happen and things like that. And so what it will do is those agents will always interact with the organizational context, so they're operating within that organization as if they were team members.
Absolutely. And one simple thing I did was putting my approach from a risk framework perspective on a 1 to 5 scale of likelihood and impact, and so it's recognized that, and it's leveraging that in the conversation. All I literally did is said just add it to the best of your knowledge. So it asked for a bit more clarification. I said, you're the professional agent, off you pop, and it's actually just gone, okay, fine, and it's gone and done that for me. So now these risks have been added, and I can click them from here and I can review them. But what I can do is go back to that risk register, and you'll now see my risk register has started to be formed. We've only asked for high level information, so titles, descriptions, current ratings. As you can see, it's all been populated, but with obviously further refinement, further supporting information, it can go a lot further, and it can populate even more information as we go. But we wanted to keep it simple for this session. So what you've seen so far is Verto very much in the vacuum of project scheduling, migrating that data over from MS Project, and then using that data alongside AI available within the platform to then, as I mentioned, get over that blank page problem and start to develop things like the risk register for me. I mentioned it, and I'll just cover it again. There are lots of other things that the platform can do. Verto is positioned as an end-to-end P3M platform. Project scheduling, risk management, those are key, but components nonetheless of the wider P3M functionality that Verto brings. So if I take a step back and go to our dashboard view, what you will see here is an example of governance and lifecycle from a P3M perspective based on my experience coming from a public sector background. So you can see here I've got a series of stages. I've got my portfolio stage, program stage, a pipeline for upcoming initiatives, and I've got a 5-stage project lifecycle. Within each of these stages, you might have flavors of this. You might have an 8-stage process, a 3-stage process. Nonetheless, there will be some form of a process as to how projects are created, initiated, how the value prop's done and how they're justified, and then how they're monitored, delivered, and ultimately closed and archived. The system's extremely flexible and can be configured to adapt to your requirements, but we do offer quite sophisticated, I must say, ready to go options for you to get started with. And within each of these stages, you might be thinking, oh, actually, we do our mandates at Discovery. When we're in definition or detailed design, we might be doing a full business case or a PID, and that would consist of all sorts of data, including things that you've seen previously, risks, benefits, costs, so on and so forth. The goal with Verto is to eliminate the use of those disparate systems. So not only to successfully move you from MS Project Online, but to also, where appropriate and where suitable, move you away from your current ways of working with offline tools, things like Excel, Word documents for your business cases, maybe SharePoint lists, so on and so forth. And so Verto within this parameter that we've set can then allow you to bring all of those things online as online form templates in the system. That does lots of things, from a standardization of data, eliminates duplication, drives efficiencies. But the real kicker is from a portfolio perspective. All the data is now in one place. That means we can seamlessly pull that data up the chain automatically to give us a holistic view over no matter what the size of your portfolio is. And in this example, we're looking at circa 140 to 150 projects. There's native dashboards in the system, exportable aggregated reports, governance reporting, professional outputs for things like your business cases, and we also interface with Power BI. But it's about looking beyond the initial mandate of moving off of MS Project Online and thinking, oh, how can we make our team more efficient? There's probably a lot of manual work going on from a reporting perspective. How does SLT get the management information they need? There's probably lots of manual work pulling together lots of information from lots of places. And so even at that base level, the Verto platform will bring it all together and then automatically aggregate it up the chain to be able to pretty much automate the reporting cycles and provide real-time, meaningful management information in the form of these dashboards, as well as things like Power BI. Ross, we've spoken a lot from a higher level perspective. Is there anything that I've missed? If so, please feel free to come in. If not, it'd be great for you to talk a little bit about the Power BI stuff we've done recently.
Yeah, thanks, Craig. I think the Power BI stuff is probably the most important. So Craig's got some great dashboards here, and you kind of can create an infinite number of dashboards because they're entirely flexible. But one of the real things that we're adding to the platform right now, and actually is going to be released in 2.5 weeks, is Power BI embedded. So whilst Craig is showing something here, we're getting way more advanced than this. We're actually embedding Power BI inside the Verto tool. So you'll be able to edit Power BI reports inside Verto across the Verto platform. So you'll be able to look at your Verto data, drag and drop whichever tables, whichever data you like, and edit a Power BI report inside Verto, publish it to your end users so they can see it, and then you basically got a limitless reporting engine sitting inside Verto, straight out of the box.
Thank you, Ross. As for anyone who knows me would be able to attest to, I could talk to you guys for hours in terms of all the functionality that Verto brings, the P3M elements. But I'd like to just wrap it before we pull back for some questions to just summarize the position. So it's really important that when you're selecting an alternative solution, not only are you able to seamlessly transition to it, and have a supporting partner to help you on that journey, but also a tool that's future proof and that can potentially provide you with further value that may not have been part of the initial remit when this landed on our desks a few months ago in terms of MS Project coming offline. There's all sorts of other things that we haven't been able to cover in the system today. You would have seen the benefits, stakeholder planning. I mean, we've got resourcing in the system, heat maps, all that good stuff sitting in the tool as well. But we will probably stop there before I get going, and I will probably pass back to Laura so that we can begin to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you ever so much, both, for that. That was a really really good demo, nice and comprehensive. Obviously, there's loads more that I know that you could touch on. So yeah, but thank you very much for going through that. And I hope it was really useful to you all. Just before we get some questions through, I was wondering, what advice would you give to an organisation who is still maybe in the early stages of thinking about what to do when Project Online does actually stop? So how urgent is it that people start making decisions now? And what is the risk if they just wait for a few months?
Well, they're in danger if they wait for a few months, because you said right at the beginning, you already can't add new tenants into Project Online, so they've switched that off already. They are going to stop the ability for adding new people, new projects very soon. So you don't really have an awful lot of time. If you wait for a couple of months, you're going to have missed the boat. You've got to be thinking about this now, and you've got to be planning what it is you're going to do post October.
I suppose there's also that gap that you want to make sure is in no way, shape, or form a gap, let alone a sizable one. You know, if you've got data in a system and the system is currently working, you want to make sure that data is working right in a new system as and when, as quickly as possible, because
Yeah.
otherwise you're in no man's land.
Yeah, or certainly already in your organisations, you should be highlighting the risk that the Project Online is going away. I'd hope everybody here had already highlighted that risk that Project Online is going
Yeah,
away.
yeah,
But and do you know what? It might be that as an organisation, your organisation might globally just say, do you know what? We'll accept that risk. We're
mm,
going to go back to manual ways of doing it. And I think what we might see is in 6 months to a year's time after post Project Online disappearing, everybody
mm,
going, oh my God, it's turned into a complete mess. What do I do? And those will be those people who have missed the boat, Laura, as you
yeah,
said. So they'll
yeah,
get to a point where they'll go, ugh, we have to fix this. And so I think we'll start to see a pickup in people deploying PPM solutions,
yeah.
probably towards this time next year, actually.
Right. Well, yeah, we'll be here.
Yeah.
Um, sorry, my dog's trying to get out. We go. Right. So, I think that probably it's always nice to be able to give people back a little bit of time. Craig, I just want to make sure that you don't have anything extra to add to the question that I posed.
No, I think Ross has summed it up. I mean, you have the time to make a choice now. And if you don't make a decision, the choice will be placed upon you, and the loss of data, the moving back to manual
Mm,
processes, or transitioning to an alternative that's been positioned by Microsoft that comes with the drawbacks that we've mentioned will be your only options. I say only options, not your only option, but that there's a lot more pain doing it in retrospect and looking back once the system's offline, than planning ahead and getting ahead of it now. And it will make it not only a lot easier from an in-flight project perspective, but also the user experience, the change management, the cultural shift as well. Because now you have the time, but that time will quickly dwindle.
mm.
So yeah, decisions probably need to be made sooner rather than later. But I think Ross summed it up quite nicely.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Fabulous. Well, if there are any questions, as mentioned, this email is going to come out to you, so you can always get back to us on email. You can contact us through our website at any point. But just to say thank you both. Thank you, Ross. Thank you, Craig, for your time today. Thank you all for joining us today as well. If you are leaving this session still a bit unsure of what to do next, we have got a fully fledged resource hub with plenty of guidance, which is all free to access and completely on this topic. So I will add that link to the email as well that I send out. So there's going to be loads packed full in this email. Um, but in there is a really one thing that I wanted to highlight is a really practical checklist that you can use to assess what you need to do and the steps that you need to take to help you start moving forward on this transition. So yeah, I'll link to that. Everything's on our website, and it's all, as I say, completely free to download, access. There's lots of different elements to it and lots of different content on this subject. Um, Right, but other than that, we really hope to see you all again. I will get the details of April's webinar out on the website very soon, so do head there. You can also find all of the details for the next webinars and all of the webinars that we do over on LinkedIn on our company page, our Verto company page. So head there and follow us, and you'll be updated with all of the information that's and future dates that's coming out soon. Um, so other than that, thank you again for all coming, and see you on next month's webinar.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
Laura.
Thank you, Laura.